The large arts academy was usually quiet in the late afternoon. Classes ended hours earlier, and the students had already gone home, leaving behind long hallways filled with soft echoes and the faint smell of cleaning spray. The cleaner walked slowly from room to room, pushing her cart, wiping surfaces, checking that everything was in order for the next morning. She liked this quiet time. It made the hard work feel a little lighter. Her young daughter waited in the lobby most days, sitting with a worn-out storybook or drawing with dull crayons on scrap paper. She understood that her mother needed the job, and she never complained. But some afternoons, when the academy felt especially silent, curiosity pulled her to explore further than usual. On this particular day, she wandered down a hallway she had never explored before. Her footsteps were soft on the polished floor, almost like she was afraid the walls might scold her for making noise. She paused when she reached a large door with lettering she couldn't read completely but recognized one word she had seen many times: hall. She pushed the door gently, expecting it to be locked, but it opened a little, just enough for her to slip inside. The room was huge, much larger than anything she had ever seen in the academy. Rows of chairs were stacked against the walls, and bright lights hung from the ceiling, making the polished floor shine. But none of that caught her attention. Her eyes locked onto the grand piano standing in the middle of the room, its black surface glowing like still water. She walked toward it slowly, almost carefully, as if approaching a living thing. She had seen pianos before in passing, but this one felt different. Something about it pulled her in. She traced the edge with her fingertip, then looked around the empty hall. No one was there. No one was watching. She took a quiet breath and lifted the lid to expose the keys. They looked clean and cold. She hesitated. She had never taken a lesson, never touched a piano properly, never learned even the basics. Still, something inside her pushed her hand forward. She let her finger rest on a single white key, feeling its smooth surface. Then she pressed it gently. A soft note floated into the air. Surprised her. She didn't expect it to sound so warm. She pressed another key, and then another, the notes forming a slow, wandering pattern. She didn't know what she was doing, but the sounds felt like they were guiding her. Her fingers moved again, this time two at a time, creating small chords that blended beautifully. She closed her eyes without meaning to, letting the echoes fill the room. What she didn't know was that not far away, the receptionist was closing up for the day. She heard something faint, a sound she wasn't used to hearing at that hour. At first, she ignored it, thinking it was a recording left on by mistake. But the sound grew clearer, rising and falling with emotion. She frowned, curious, and followed the music down the hallway. She stopped at the open door of the hall and peered in. She expected to see a student practicing or maybe one of the instructors testing the instruments. But instead, she saw the cleaner's daughter sitting at the piano, playing with her eyes closed, her small hands moving across the keys with a confidence that didn't match her age. The receptionist's eyebrows lifted. She didn't know much about playing piano, but she knew talent when she heard it. The notes flowed together smoothly, as if the girl were telling a story through them. Each sound carried a feeling, soft, hopeful, gentle. It didn't feel random. It didn't feel like a child pressing keys for fun. It felt like someone who understood music, deeply and instinctively. The receptionist turned and walked quickly down the hall, searching for someone who might understand what she was hearing. She found a music coach packing his things in a nearby room. She knocked on the doorframe, breathless. "You need to hear this," she said, keeping her voice low but urgent. The coach looked confused. "Hear what?" "There's someone in the hall, playing. And it's different. Just come." He sighed, but something in her expression made him follow. He walked behind her toward the hall, expecting to find one of the students messing around on the piano, maybe even playing something decent. But when they reached the doorway, he froze. The girl was still playing, hands moving softly, body relaxed, expression peaceful. The coach tilted his head slightly as he listened. His eyes slowly widened. He recognized patterns in her playing, natural timing, smooth transitions, a gentle emotional pacing. These were things even trained students struggled to show. She wasn't just hitting keys. She was expressing something. He whispered, "She's never taken lessons?" The receptionist shook her head. "Not that I know of. She waits here every day while her mother cleans." The coach stepped into the room but didn't interrupt the girl. He stood at a distance, listening closely. The girl didn't notice him. She kept playing, letting the music guide her. Her fingers weren't perfect, but the emotion behind each note made up for every small mistake. In another part of the building, the cleaner finally noticed that her daughter wasn't in the lobby. She panicked for a moment, fearing the girl had wandered somewhere unsafe. She walked quickly through the corridors, calling softly. When she reached the hall, she heard the piano before she saw her daughter. She recognized the sound instantly and felt her heart skip. She entered quietly, her breath caught in her throat. There was her child, sitting at the grand piano, playing as if she had practiced for years. The cleaner froze. She knew the girl had always been curious about music, but she never imagined something like this. The cleaner moved closer, her eyes filling with emotion. She didn't know what to think. Pride, confusion, fear. She wanted to tell her daughter to stop, afraid she might get scolded for touching the expensive instrument. But when she saw the coach and the receptionist standing nearby, listening with such intensity, she stayed silent. The girl finished the melody slowly, letting the final note hang in the air. Then she opened her eyes and saw everyone watching her. She gasped softly, her cheeks flushing. She lowered her hands quickly and stood from the bench as if she had done something wrong. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." The coach raised a hand gently. "No, don't apologize." His voice was calm and warm. "Where did you learn to play?" The girl looked confused. "I didn't learn. I just tried." Her mother stepped forward, touching her shoulder. "She has never taken lessons," she said quietly. The coach studied the girl with renewed interest. He understood what he had heard. Natural talent. Rare, unpolished but undeniably real. He walked toward the piano and sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance. "Play one more time," he said gently. "Anything you want." The girl hesitated, looking at her mother for permission. The cleaner gave a small nod, still overwhelmed. The girl sat again, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. This time, the coach watched her fingers carefully. She had flaws as expected from someone untrained, but her instincts were exceptional. She played with emotion, not technique, but the result was captivating. The coach felt a chill run down his spine. He had taught hundreds of students, some talented, some hardworking, some both. But very few had this rare gift, the ability to express without being taught, the ability to turn simple notes into something meaningful. When she finished again, the room was silent. The coach took a slow breath. "You have something very special," he said softly. "Something you don't even understand yet." The girl looked at her hands, unsure of what he meant. The cleaner placed a hand on her daughter's back, gently guiding her away from the piano. She still feared someone might accuse her child of touching something off limits. But the coach stepped forward. "Please don't worry," he said to the cleaner. "This is not trouble. This is something wonderful." The cleaner didn't answer. She didn't know how to react. She only knew that her daughter had sat at a piano for the first time and somehow created music that had drawn people from across the building. Something about it felt bigger than she could understand. But one thing was certain. The sound the girl created had changed something. For the girl, for her mother, for everyone who heard it. And none of them knew how far that single moment would take them. The hall stayed quiet for a moment after the girl finished her second melody. The sound had faded, but something in the air still felt full, like the music hadn't completely left. The girl slowly slipped her hands off the piano keys and looked at the coach, unsure if she had done something right or something wrong. The coach wasn't someone who got excited easily. He taught music for years and knew how rare natural skill could be, yet he kept his emotions controlled most of the time. But right now, he couldn't hide the surprise in his eyes. He leaned slightly forward, as if he still couldn't believe what he'd heard. "That was beautiful," he said softly. The girl lowered her head, shy. She wasn't used to compliments, especially from adults she didn't know. The cleaner stood close to her, still anxious, not sure if she should take her daughter out of the room or let her stay. The last thing she wanted was to get in trouble at the place where she worked so hard every day. The receptionist stepped forward with a gentle smile. "How long have you been playing like this?" The girl shook her head. "This is my first time." The receptionist and the coach exchanged a look that held a mixture of disbelief and amazement. The cleaner noticed their expressions and felt her chest tighten. She had always felt her daughter was different, but she never imagined anything like this. At home, the girl hummed tunes while doing chores or tapped rhythms on the table while waiting for dinner, but the cleaner assumed it was just something children do. The coach took a step toward the piano and tapped a few notes gently, showing a simple pattern. "Can you play this back for me?" he asked. The girl listened carefully and nodded. She placed her fingers where she remembered the keys were and played the exact pattern without hesitation. Not only did she copy it correctly, but she added a small flourish at the end, something soft and emotional that surprised even her. The coach blinked. "You didn't just repeat it," he said. "You felt it." The cleaner didn't understand what that meant, but she could tell it was something good. The girl looked unsure, like she didn't know what she had done differently. She just played what sounded right to her. "Do you feel scared?" the coach asked gently. The girl shook her head. "No, it just feels like telling a story, but with sounds." The coach nodded slowly, impressed. "That's exactly what music is." As they talked, a small group of people began gathering outside the hall. Some were students finishing late projects, some were staff preparing to close the building, and others were musicians finishing their own practice sessions. They didn't know what was happening, but the faint sound of piano earlier had caught their attention. Now they stood in the doorway watching the scene inside. The girl felt small under their surprised stares. She moved closer to her mother, but the coach raised a calming hand. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're not in trouble. Everyone is just amazed." The cleaner felt her shoulders relax a little, though she still didn't want the attention on her daughter. She wished she could scoop the girl up and take her home where things were simple and quiet. But there was something in the coach's voice, something hopeful, something that made her pause. One of the musicians stepped closer. She was carrying a violin case and had been practicing in a nearby studio. She tilted her head as she looked at the girl. "Was it really her playing earlier?" she asked the coach quietly. The coach nodded. "Yes, and she's never had a lesson." The violinist's eyes widened. "That's almost impossible." The cleaner shifted nervously, wishing she could fade into the shadows. The girl held her mother's hand tightly now, her earlier confidence replaced with shyness as more people stared. The coach cleared his throat, bringing everyone's attention back to him. "Let's not crowd her," he said. "She's just a child. Give her some space." People stepped back respectfully, but their eyes stayed fixed on the girl. They whispered softly among themselves, trying to understand how someone so young, with no training, could play in a way that moved them. The coach looked at the girl again. "Do you mind if I ask you something?" he said. She nodded a little. "When you were playing, what were you thinking about?" The girl frowned slightly, as if searching for the right words. "I wasn't thinking," she answered. "I just felt something in my chest, like a picture. I played what the picture looked like." The coach stared at her like she had said something profound. "That's how composers think," he whispered. "Not students. Composers." The girl didn't really understand, but her mother did. At least a little. She knew the word composer. It was something important in the music world. Something big. The thought scared her and thrilled her at the same time. The cleaner cleared her throat quietly and spoke for the first time since entering the hall. "Sir, I'm sorry if she touched something she shouldn't. I will make sure it doesn't happen again." But the coach shook his head firmly. "Please don't apologize. She didn't break anything. She didn't interrupt anything. She created something." He softened his voice. "If anything, we should be thanking her for bringing music to this empty hall." The cleaner looked confused. She wasn't used to praise, especially from people who wore crisp clothes and spoke with such authority. She looked at her daughter, who was still gripping her hand, and then back at the coach. The coach turned to the receptionist. "Can you bring a bottle of water for the girl?" he asked. "She must be nervous." The receptionist nodded and hurried away. The girl watched curiously as she left, not used to people doing things for her. The coach sat down on the piano bench again, patting the space next to him. "Come," he said gently. "Let's try something else. Only if you want to." The girl looked at her mother. The cleaner hesitated for a moment, then gave a small nod. The girl slowly sat beside him. "I'll play a very simple tune," he said. "Just a short one. Try to listen with your heart, not your ears. Then play it back." He played a few bars of a soft, emotional melody. It wasn't complicated, but it required a sense of timing and feeling that beginners normally didn't have. The girl listened, her eyes slightly closed, her body swaying just a little with the rhythm. When he finished, she let the silence settle before placing her fingers on the keys. She took a breath and began to play. Not exactly like he did. Hers was gentler, more delicate, and a little slower, but it carried the same heart. She even added a tiny pause that made the melody feel more thoughtful. The coach closed his eyes as he listened. When she finished, the room was silent again. No one dared breathe loudly. "That pause you added," the coach said finally, "was not in what I played." The girl looked worried. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," he said warmly. "It made the melody better." The cleaner felt her breath catch. Better? How could her daughter improve the music of someone who taught at an academy? As if reading her mind, the coach turned to her. "Your daughter has something remarkable. This isn't just talent. This is instinct. Can't be taught. It's born inside." The cleaner didn't know what to say. She only knew that life had been the same every day. Cleaning rooms, packing lunches, trying to make ends meet. And now suddenly, something had shifted. Something unexpected. Something powerful. Before she could respond, the receptionist returned with a bottle of water and a gentle smile. The girl took it shyly and drank a little. People outside the door still watched, waiting to see what would happen next. The coach took a breath. "I think we need to show this to someone else," he murmured to the receptionist. "Someone who can help her grow." The cleaner stiffened at those words, not sure if she should be excited or afraid. The girl didn't understand everything that was happening. She only knew one thing. When she touched the piano, she felt alive in a way she never had before. She didn't know why people were watching. She didn't know why the coach seemed amazed. She didn't know why her mother looked both proud and scared. She just knew the piano felt like it was talking to her, and she wanted to answer it. The coach stood up and looked at everyone gathered. "Let's give her time. Let her breathe. She's not a show," he said. "She's a child discovering something new." People nodded respectfully and began stepping back, giving the girl and her mother space. But even as they left, one thing was clear. Something important had just begun. And none of them, not even the coach, knew where this moment would lead. The next morning, the academy felt alive in a way it hadn't before. The corridors were filled with the usual sounds of students hurrying to class, books shuffling, and quiet conversations. But inside the main hall, something different lingered, almost like the memory of a beautiful song floating in the air. The cleaner and her daughter arrived early, as usual. The mother pushed her cart quietly down the hall, the daughter trailing behind with a mix of excitement and nervousness she could not explain. The previous afternoon's event had spread quietly among the staff. Word had traveled from the receptionist to other assistants, to music teachers who had stayed late. Everyone seemed to be talking about the girl who had played the piano like she had been born to do it. Some wondered if it was a fluke, a lucky set of notes pressed by chance. Others, more experienced, felt that rare spark of something extraordinary. As the cleaner started her usual rounds, wiping tables and sweeping floors, she noticed the girl's eyes keeping to the piano in the corner of the hall. She wanted to say, "Don't get too close," but she stopped herself. Something told her that letting her daughter explore this curiosity might be the beginning of something bigger. By mid-morning, a few students began trickling into the hall for lessons or practice. The girl stayed quietly, watching the piano as if it were a friend waiting to speak. She could hear faint footsteps approaching from the hallway, and then she felt a presence beside her. It was the music coach. He smiled softly at her, crouching slightly so his eyes were level with hers. "Do you remember the song we practiced yesterday?" he asked gently. The girl nodded. "Yes. Would you like to try it again?" he asked. "Only if you want to. No one else needs to hear." Her fingers itched to play. She nodded quickly, a small smile forming on her lips. The coach guided her to the bench. "Relax," he said softly. "Listen with your heart, not your eyes. Feel the music, not just the keys." She sat down carefully and lifted her hands. At first, her fingers trembled slightly, unsure, but as soon as she pressed the first note, the room seemed to hold its breath. The notes came out clear, soft, and expressive, as if she had been playing for years instead of a single afternoon. The coach watched quietly, amazed at how instinctively she adjusted timing and tone. He knew she had never been taught dynamics, phrasing, or proper fingering, yet every note carried meaning. He whispered a soft encouragement. "That's it. Just like that." Outside the hall, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Someone was walking fast, almost running. The cleaner noticed it first and felt a small wave of panic. She peeked around the corner and saw a tall man entering. He was not a student, and he did not look like the usual staff. He had a presence that seemed to fill the hallway, calm but commanding attention. The music coach straightened slightly and whispered, "Stay calm. He's visiting today. A professional." The girl glanced up, curious. The tall man's eyes fell on her immediately, and she felt a strange sensation, as if he could see right into the music she was creating. He walked closer, his pace steady, but not threatening. When he reached the hall, he stopped and listened quietly. The coach gestured for the girl to continue. She played, unsure of the man's presence but drawn to the piano too strongly to stop. Every note she pressed seemed to tell a story only she understood. The man's eyebrows lifted. He had spent decades listening to young talents, training students, performing on big stages, and yet he could not hide the astonishment on his face. He had heard the faint rumor of the girl yesterday, but he had expected exaggeration. What he heard now was real, undeniable, and rare. When the girl finished, she glanced up at the man, shy and uncertain. Her hands lingered on the keys. He stepped forward slowly, almost cautiously. "You played that?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying awe. The girl nodded. "Yes. Have you ever had lessons?" he asked. The cleaner spoke quickly, her voice trembling slightly. "No, sir. She just tried it yesterday." The man blinked, taking a deep breath. He was a famous pianist, well known in many countries for his performances and teaching. Yet in that moment he felt something he rarely felt. A sense of wonder and a little disbelief because what the girl played was not something that could be taught easily. He knelt slightly to be closer to her level. "Would you like to play for me again?" he asked gently. The girl hesitated, looking at her mother. The cleaner gave a small, reassuring nod. "It's okay," she whispered. The girl sat down again. Her small fingers touched the keys, and the music began. It was different from before. It was softer, more thoughtful, like she was speaking directly to the man with her music. The notes carried confidence, innocence, and emotion all at once. The man closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. He recognized patterns, timing, and phrasing that even advanced students struggled to grasp. He felt a shiver run down his spine. He had played with many prodigies, taught children, and seen talent, but this was instinctive genius. When the music ended, the hall was silent again, except for the faint echo of the final notes. The man looked at the girl, who was staring at the piano nervously. "Do you understand what you did?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "I just played." "That's exactly it," he said, smiling. "You didn't think about rules or lessons. You played from here." He tapped his chest gently. "From here." The coach and the receptionist exchanged a quiet look. They both knew what they were witnessing. Rarely, very rarely, someone born with talent like this appeared. A child who could instinctively feel the music and express it fully without being taught. The man straightened and turned to the coach. "I think we need to help her," he said in a low voice. "Properly. She has something that could go far, but only if guided." The cleaner felt a mixture of pride and fear. She had never imagined her daughter would be noticed, let alone by someone famous in the music world. Her mind raced. Could she allow her child to enter this world? What would it mean for her daily life? The girl looked up at her mother, sensing her worry. "I like playing," she said softly. "I don't want to stop." Her mother smiled faintly, feeling her heart swell. "I know," she whispered, "and I won't stop you." The pianist nodded toward the coach. "Let's see what she can do with a simple exercise." He played a short, unfamiliar melody, a bit more challenging than before. He didn't tell her the technique or the theory behind it. He simply asked her to listen and try. The girl leaned closer, her fingers hovering over the keys, and played back the melody almost perfectly, adding her own soft touch at the end. The man's eyes widened slightly. "She understands it instinctively," he said. The cleaner's heart raced. She had never felt so much emotion in one place before. Her daughter, sitting quietly at the piano, had not only impressed experts, but she had also touched them emotionally. The receptionist whispered, "What should we do now?" The coach replied softly, "We give her a chance. Proper lessons, guidance, support, but carefully. She is only a child." The pianist smiled. "Yes, and if she is willing, I would like to mentor her personally. I rarely do this, but I cannot ignore this kind of talent." The cleaner didn't know what to say. Fear and excitement collided inside her. She had always wanted a better life for her daughter, but the thought of stepping into the world of professional music felt intimidating and overwhelming. The girl looked up at her mother and then at the pianist. "Can I?" she asked simply, her eyes wide. Her mother's heart melted. "Yes," she said softly but firmly. "If you want to." The man nodded. "Good. We will start slowly. Nothing rushed. But we will see how far this gift can take her." The girl smiled shyly, her hands hovering over the keys again. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. Playing the piano felt like flying, and now she had people who wanted to help her soar. As they left the hall together, a small crowd of staff and students peeked curiously through the doorway. Whispers spread quickly. "That was her. The cleaner's daughter? She's amazing." No one could have predicted that a quiet girl, sitting in the empty hall the day before, would already be at the start of something extraordinary. The music she had played instinctively had opened doors and captured hearts in a way that would change her life forever. And for the first time, she understood that one simple act, pressing the keys of a piano she had never touched before, had the power to alter the path of her life completely. The next few days passed in a blur of excitement and nerves for the cleaner and her daughter. News of the girl's talent had spread quietly among the academy's staff and students, and by the second morning, a few teachers were peeking into the hall, curious to witness it for themselves. The girl, though still shy, began to recognize some familiar faces who came not to scold but to watch and encourage. Her mother tried to keep life as normal as possible. She still pushed her cleaning cart, still washed floors and wiped windows, but there was now a constant hum of anticipation in the air. Every time the girl glanced at the piano, her eyes sparkled with curiosity and a little excitement. She had begun to understand that the piano was more than an object. It was a voice that could speak what she could not say with words. One morning, as the cleaner was organizing chairs, the pianist who had discovered her daughter appeared again. He carried a notebook, a small folder, and a gentle expression. "Good morning," he said softly. "May I speak with her privately for a moment?" The cleaner hesitated. "Of course," she said cautiously, still protective of her child. He knelt beside her daughter. "I would like to show you some simple exercises," he said. "Nothing difficult. Just things that will help your hands and fingers move more freely. Will you try?" The girl nodded eagerly. "Yes," she whispered. For the next hour, the pianist guided her through small, gentle exercises. He explained nothing about theory, nothing about rules, only encouraged her to feel the music in her fingers. She absorbed every instruction quickly, not just copying but adding subtle touches that reflected her instinctive understanding of rhythm and melody. Outside the hall, word was already spreading. A few more teachers and staff members, drawn by the whispers of her talent, quietly assembled to watch without disturbing her. They were careful not to interfere, but they could not help themselves from marveling at the young girl. She had a way of moving her fingers that seemed effortless, as if the music were a natural extension of her body. The pianist paused for a moment. "You are learning quickly," he said, impressed. "Do you want to play something for the others?" The girl's eyes widened. She had never performed in front of more than a few adults before. Her fingers hovered over the keys, and her mother's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. She looked at her mother, seeking reassurance. The cleaner smiled faintly and whispered, "It's okay. Just play like you did yesterday." Taking a deep breath, the girl began a new melody. The notes were soft at first, hesitant, then grew more confident as she relaxed. She wasn't performing perfectly, but she didn't need to. The emotion she poured into the music filled the room, drawing in everyone who listened. Some teachers exchanged glances, shaking their heads in disbelief. Others held their breath, afraid to interrupt the spellbinding sound. By the time the last note faded, the hall was completely silent. No one moved. Then, quietly, a few people clapped, followed by more, until the hall was filled with gentle applause. The girl's face turned red, and she lowered her hands. The pianist smiled warmly. "See," he said, "music can touch people without you even trying." Her mother, still standing nearby, felt tears prick her eyes. She had worked hard all her life, doing what she could to support her daughter, but she never imagined this. Her child had a gift that was rare, extraordinary, and now undeniable. Later that day, a group of visiting artists arrived at the academy. They had heard of the girl from staff members and were curious. Among them were composers, violinists, and vocal coaches, all respected in their fields. When they entered the hall, the girl felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She didn't know who they were, but their interest made her pulse quicken. The pianist introduced her gently. "This is the young girl I told you about. She has never had formal lessons, yet she plays instinctively. Please, listen to her." The girl sat at the piano again, her fingers resting lightly on the keys. She could feel the weight of expectation, but she remembered what the pianist had told her. To play from the heart. She closed her eyes and began. The music filled the room, soft and expressive at first, then growing more confident and rich. The visitors listened silently, their faces reflecting amazement. Some whispered to each other, but their words were hushed, almost reverent. It wasn't just skill. It was emotion, intuition, and natural artistry that left everyone in awe. When the girl finished, the visitors clapped softly, exchanging nods of approval. One of the composers, an older man with silver hair, stepped forward. "Remarkable," he said, his voice calm but full of wonder. "She has a sense of music that most take years to develop." The girl looked at him, unsure of what to say. She wasn't used to such praise, but she felt happy and a little proud. The visitors began asking questions softly to avoid overwhelming her. "How long have you been playing? Do you take lessons? Have you composed anything yourself?" The girl shook her head. "I just play what I feel," she said quietly. The visitors exchanged glances, some smiling, some thoughtful. They could see the spark of genius in her, the kind of instinct that could not be taught in any classroom. They whispered to each other, planning how they could nurture her gift, how they could help her grow without taking away her innocence. Her mother stood behind her, holding her hand lightly. She felt a mixture of pride and fear. Pride because her daughter's talent was real and rare. Fear because this world was so different from the quiet life she had known. She wondered if she could keep her daughter safe, while allowing her to step into a future that promised both opportunity and challenge. The pianist leaned toward the girl. "Would you like to come to a small recital next week?" he asked. "Nothing big, just some of the teachers and students. A chance to share your music." The girl nodded eagerly. "Yes," she said softly. Her mother bit her lip but smiled. "If you want to, we can go," she whispered. The visitors spoke quietly among themselves. One of the violinists suggested a scholarship for formal training. Another composer mentioned arranging lessons with professional teachers who could guide her naturally without overwhelming her. They all agreed that the girl's instinctive talent was precious and needed careful nurturing. Over the next few days, the girl began to practice more regularly, though never under pressure. The pianist and a few teachers introduced her to simple exercises to strengthen her hands and improve her technique, but they always emphasized feeling over rules. She played music she created herself, mixing her own instincts with the guidance she received. Each day, she grew more confident, more expressive, and more aware of the power her music had on others. Word of her talent quietly reached local musicians outside the academy. A few arrived, curious to see the child who had been described as extraordinary. Some were hesitant at first, thinking the story might be exaggerated, but when they heard her play, they too were astonished. The girl's music didn't just sound good. It felt alive, and it touched everyone in the room. Her mother watched, often from a distance, sometimes standing close to hold her hand. She realized that her daughter's life was changing. The piano had become more than an instrument. It had become a bridge to a world she had never imagined. One afternoon, as the girl practiced a new melody, the pianist watched her silently. "You're learning quickly," he said softly. "And not just skills. You're learning to feel music in new ways." The girl looked up, her eyes shining. "I like it," she said. "I feel happy when I play." The pianist smiled. "That's all that matters. Never lose that feeling. Talent is important, but joy is what keeps it alive." Her mother, standing nearby, felt tears slip down her cheeks. She had never imagined seeing her daughter grow in this way, not so fast, not with so much attention. Yet she understood one thing clearly. This was only the beginning. By the end of the week, arrangements had been made for the girl to receive structured lessons, guided carefully by the pianist and other instructors who respected her natural talent. The academy prepared a small recital to showcase her skill, inviting a few trusted artists and teachers. The girl practiced with excitement and nervousness, unaware that this was the first step toward a future filled with possibilities she had never dreamed of. And as she played quietly one evening, alone in the hall with her mother watching, she felt a sense of promise and hope she could not fully explain. She knew that something big had begun, that the music she created instinctively could touch people's hearts, and that her life would never be the same again. The morning of the small recital arrived quietly, though the air felt full of anticipation. The academy, usually calm in the early hours, buzzed softly with the presence of a few invited guests. Teachers, visiting musicians, and students filtered in slowly, each finding a seat without disturbing the polished floor or the quiet mood. For the first time, the cleaner and her daughter arrived early, carrying a mixture of nerves and excitement that neither could put into words. Her mother kept her hand gently on her daughter's shoulder as they entered the hall. The girl's eyes widened at the sight of chairs neatly arranged, small flowers on the piano, and a few unfamiliar faces looking at her with interest. She had never performed for anyone outside the academy staff, and now she felt a flutter in her chest that made her fingers itch to play. The pianist who had discovered her stepped forward with a warm smile. "Remember," he said quietly, bending slightly so she could hear, "this is not a test, this is sharing. Play with your heart, not your head. Let the music come to them as it comes to you." She nodded, taking a deep breath. The hall felt still for a moment, the kind of stillness that made small sounds, even a whisper, seem loud. She climbed the piano bench carefully and rested her hands on the keys. The room waited, not impatiently, but respectfully, as if everyone sensed something important was about to happen. Her fingers moved first slowly, almost tentatively, then found the rhythm naturally. She closed her eyes, letting the notes flow through her as if they were part of her own breath. The music filled the hall, soft and clear at first, then growing richer, bolder, and more expressive with every passing measure. She didn't need to think about technique, because instinct guided her. Every note carried emotion, joy, curiosity, hope, and a quiet strength that was far beyond her years. The audience listened in near silence. Some whispered to each other, trying to describe what they heard. "It's not just skill," one teacher said quietly. "It's feeling. She's telling a story without words." The visiting pianist, seated in the front row, leaned forward slightly. He had performed on some of the world's biggest stages, and yet the purity of her music made him shiver. This wasn't the perfection of trained students. This was something deeper, instinctive artistry that could touch hearts instantly. When the girl finished, the final note hanging delicately in the air, the hall remained quiet for a heartbeat, as if the music itself had asked for pause. Then soft, polite applause began, growing steadily into full appreciation. The girl opened her eyes slowly, startled by the response. Her mother smiled faintly, trying not to show her own tears, and squeezed her hand lightly. The pianist stood and approached her gently. "Do you know what you did?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "I just played," she whispered. "That's exactly it," he said. "You played from your heart. That is what makes music alive. People can feel it, even without understanding how it's made." After the recital, several visitors approached her. Some brought small gifts of sheet music, while others simply smiled and offered quiet words of encouragement. A few asked if she would consider formal lessons, explaining gently that her talent could go far if nurtured carefully. Her mother felt both pride and concern. Pride because she knew her daughter had an extraordinary gift. Concern because she also understood that stepping into this world would change their lives forever. But she realized one thing clearly: she could not hold her daughter back. This was her moment, her path, and she had to support it. That evening, they returned home quietly. The cleaner prepared dinner while her daughter sat at the small table, sketching music notes she had remembered from the day. She hummed softly as she worked, already thinking about new melodies. Her mother watched her, reflecting on how far they had come in such a short time. Only a week ago, her daughter had been sitting quietly in the lobby, waiting while her mother cleaned. Now she had performed for musicians, teachers, and visitors, leaving everyone in awe. The cleaner felt a mixture of disbelief, gratitude, and hope. Over the next few weeks, the girl's life began to change in small but meaningful ways. She began taking short, structured lessons with the pianist and a few trusted teachers. The focus was always on keeping her love for music alive, not overwhelming her with rules or pressure. She practiced daily, learning gradually, but her instinctive ability never faded. In fact, it grew stronger. Her music became richer, more nuanced, and more expressive. At home, life continued as usual in some ways. Her mother still worked at the academy, and their small apartment remained cozy and simple. Yet, the piano now had a permanent presence in their lives, and music flowed from it in moments of joy, curiosity, and quiet reflection. Friends and neighbors noticed the change, commenting on the girl's confidence and the brightness in her eyes. One afternoon, the pianist visited their home, carrying a small notebook and a smile. "Would you like to try composing your own piece today?" he asked. The girl's eyes lit up. She had never thought of creating music on her own, but the idea thrilled her. She nodded eagerly. With guidance from the pianist, she began placing notes carefully, experimenting with rhythms and harmonies. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Every choice she made reflected her instincts, her emotions, and her imagination. Her mother watched from the kitchen doorway, amazed at how focused and happy her daughter was. She realized that talent alone wasn't enough. What mattered most was the joy and love she felt while creating. The piano had given her daughter a voice, and she knew it would guide her far beyond what she had ever imagined. Soon, more opportunities began to appear. Invitations to small performances, meetings with musicians, and even a chance to attend a summer music program emerged. Each time, her mother hesitated, worried about the sudden exposure, but the girl's enthusiasm was infectious. She wanted to learn, to play, to share her music with others. The first public performance outside the academy was a quiet affair. The girl played on a small stage in front of a local audience, including a few music critics. She felt nervous, but as soon as her fingers touched the keys, the anxiety melted away. The music flowed naturally, full of emotion, and the audience responded with admiration and warmth. After the performance, one of the critics approached the pianist. "She's extraordinary," he said quietly. "Even untrained, she has a depth of feeling that few professionals achieve." The pianist nodded, pride in his eyes. "She's only beginning. With proper guidance, she could reach amazing heights." Back at home that night, the girl sat quietly at her piano, reflecting on everything that had happened. She realized that the music she loved had opened doors she never imagined. She thought about her mother, who had supported her quietly but unwaveringly, and felt gratitude she could not express in words. Her mother joined her, sitting on the edge of the bench. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. The girl smiled. "I'm happy to. I didn't know I could do this." "You can," her mother said. "And this is only the beginning." The following months passed with careful balance. Lessons, small performances, and home practice filled the girl's days. She learned gradually, never rushed, and her love for music grew stronger with each passing day. Teachers marveled at her instinctive understanding, and the pianist continued to guide her, nurturing her talent with patience and care. The cleaner watched all of this with awe and humility. She knew that their lives had changed forever, but she also knew that the girl's happiness and passion were the most important things. Every time she heard her daughter play, she felt a mixture of joy, relief, and pride. Then, one afternoon, as the girl played a gentle melody in the hall of the academy, a visitor approached quietly. It was a famous composer who had heard about her talent and wanted to meet her. The girl's mother felt nervous, but she knew this was another step forward. The composer listened silently, then smiled. "You have something truly rare," he said to the girl. "Keep playing like this, and you could touch the hearts of many people." The girl nodded shyly, her fingers resting on the keys. She understood the meaning of his words in her own way. She didn't think about fame or recognition. She only thought about the joy of creating music and the feeling that it could reach people in ways words never could. As the days turned into months, her talent continued to grow. She learned new techniques, explored different styles, and even started writing simple compositions of her own. Her performances remained heartfelt, never losing the instinctive touch that had captivated everyone from the beginning. Her mother often sat nearby, quietly proud and always supportive. She realized that the piano had not only revealed her daughter's gift but had also strengthened the bond between them. Together, they navigated this new world, balancing caution with excitement, always keeping the girl's happiness and love for music at the center. The girl never forgot the moment she first touched the piano in the empty hall. That single act, born of curiosity and instinct, had changed her life completely. From that day forward, every note she played reminded her that talent was not just about skill. It was about heart, courage, and the willingness to explore the unknown. And as she grew, sharing her music with more people, she carried the quiet truth with her, that even the simplest beginnings could lead to extraordinary journeys, and that the music inside her would always be her guide. The cleaner watched her daughter one evening, the hall empty except for the two of them. She felt a deep, quiet pride. The little girl who had once wandered into an empty room out of curiosity had become someone who could inspire and move others with a touch of her fingers. And for both of them, the journey had only just begun. The piano, silent now, seemed to glow softly in the fading light. It had been a doorway to dreams, a voice for emotions, and a bridge to the future. And the girl, the cleaner's daughter, had found her place in the world, one note at a time.